Now, hello everyone. Welcome to this extraordinary session of the HCID Research Center seminar. We have today the honor to receive Pouria Hadjibagheri. He's the Technical and Development Lead of Public Health England. I am Ernesto Priego from the Center for HCID, Stuart Scott from HCID and the Interaction Lab is co-hosting this event. We'll have a presentation from Pouria first on the coronavirus dashboard for half an hour or so, and then we'll have an opportunity for questions via the chat. So if you have any questions, please write them on the chat, and Stuart will kindly read them out after the presentation. Pouria, welcome to City University of London. Thank you for being here. The room is yours.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, everyone. Very glad to be here. My name is Pouria. I'm a technical lead and development lead of the coronavirus project. As a day job, I'm a lead software engineer at Public Health England. I'm hoping to share some of our experiences about the coronavirus dashboard with you today. So let's get started. So we'll start by giving a general idea of the project and how we got where we are, and then we will talk about design, then transparency in general, the technology we're using, and then we can have a Q&A about different things. So how did we get here? So let's before I get into the history and the details of how we got here, let me just give you an idea of where we actually are. So this is where we currently are with the service. So we're running a service, a national service that with the majority of users from the United Kingdom, although we have very, very committed users from across the world these days. We have, on average, 750,000 unique users every day. Some days is 1.2 million, some days is 700, but usually on average 750,000, adding up to about 2.3, 2.5 million users a week. Part depends on what is in the news. It generates about 80 million page views each week, and on average, again, 45 million daily requests to the service, which at its peak, we observed something like 76 million requests in one 24-hour period. We offer different services as a part of this national service that includes the API, different types of downloads, as well as the website. Our API, version 2 of our API is solely dedicated to download data in batch. So that currently receives about 1.3 million requests a day for download of data. And we have at around 4 p.m. every day, about 100,000 users clicking refresh at the same time, which of course introduces certain challenges in terms of running the service, which we'll get into a bit later. So how did we get here? This service started back in April. In fact, the first version of the dashboard went live on the 14th of April, 2020. It was essentially, before that, a kind of a brainchild, if you like, of our team lead, Julian, who is also in the audience today. It essentially, he felt the need to produce a service that to publish the data on a daily basis, and so went ahead and with the cooperation of some colleagues, created at first a simple ArcGIS map with a few figures in there. Then then NHSX got involved and commissioned the first version of this service. So it didn't look exactly like this, but along the same lines. Once the initial product was delivered, they passed it on to PHE for maintenance, and we took over it around the 10th of April, and the service went live on the 14th. And I have been involved with it since, I think it was the 9th of April, before it was passed to PHE. Yeah, and then it started evolving. Initially, we just showed four daily figures. So daily and cumulative cases and daily and cumulative deaths. The demand for data grew over time, and once the press conferences in the UK started around, I think it was late June, if I'm not mistaken. It was before they stopped. It was felt that there will be a need for a service that provides even more data. So we did already have a service. We just needed to redesign it and rethink it in a sense, and make it possible to accommodate more data in a more user-friendly way. So we started thinking about a new design towards late May, and we started the development of the new service. So we called this version 2 of the service in the first week of June, and the service went live on our staging domain on the 27th of June. And the day after, the Prime Minister tweeted it, and it suddenly started getting very, very big traffic. Initially, we had about 4,000 people at most, mostly around, on average, 2,000 people concurrently looking at the website at around 2 p.m. when it was this version. When this version came along, it grew to around 13,000. And when it went into production in August, it grew to about 25,000. And right now, as I said, we experience on some days up to 100,000 concurrent users and about 80,000 on average. So that's how, in short, we got where we are. But there were quite a number of challenges that we needed to address along the way. Not least that we needed to provide something that is accurate, but is also user-friendly. And there needed to be a balance between the two. So the daily process involved in getting the data is it's seemingly to some of the users, it's very simple. We just add a bunch of data to a spreadsheet and we put it on the website, except that's not how the data are collected and published. It involves a lot of work that starts at around 8 a.m. Each day. So we have been doing this since basically May, I think. So it involves quite a number of steps. You could in essence see that we have a pipeline. So that would be a data pipeline for the more techie audience. This is based on Apache Spark. And at 8 a.m., our analysts and at PHE starts by gathering some of the data from different sources and doing certain analysis. On the data, doing some manual processing that needs to be done. Sometimes the structure of the data needs to be verified. Sometimes it needs to be changed. Sometimes it needs to, the data needs to be entered manually. So that process starts at 8 a.m. And it starts usually by, England cases that were processed overnight. And by around noon, we have the MSOA data file. So MSOA would be the small areas you see on the map that have on average 8,000, 8,500 people in population. That's a 50 megabyte file each day right now. Then at around 2:30 p.m., we get the demographics data. That's the data that produces the nice heat maps that you see on the website. And that's a very, very big data set. So that we get a 260 megabyte data set at around 2:30. And then at 3 p.m., the main data is ready. So when I say the main data would be everything that is not these two. So everything else is in this data, in this data set. And the availability of this, what we call pushing this data, would automatically trigger our ETL pipeline. For those who don't know, ETL stands for extract, transform, and load. So it extracts the data from this file, it does the processing that needs to be done, and then it loads it into our database. So the pre-processing of this file, and only this file, takes around 2 minutes. It used to be around 40 minutes. We changed a whole lot of things to reduce it to 2 minutes because it was causing us a lot of grief, not least delay in publication. And then it takes about 4 minutes to calculate derived metrics. So the derived metrics would be the metrics that show you the rates, the changes. Something is going up or going down. The nice things, the arrows that you see on the homepage of the website, the rolling rate, the rolling sum. These are all derived from one metric that need to be calculated. So once that is done, they start getting loaded into the database, and one version of them will be stored as a file in our archives for audits and other purposes. On a very, very good day, this will happen at 3 p.m. When I'm saying on a very, very good day, that would be in about 10% of the cases, which means that on most days, we don't really have the data at 3 p.m. So we have 26 sources of data that feed into this pipeline. Not all of them manually handled. Some need to be, most aren't. If one of those files are delayed, then we have a problem. If it is a primary data set, like say cases for England, or something along those lines, then we have a big problem because we can't really proceed with any of these until that data, that piece of data becomes available. Same goes for England deaths. If you don't have England deaths, we can't process and calculate probably close to half of our metrics. So publishing something could be very difficult, if not nearly impossible. It has happened before, and we have only published the cases, but in general, it makes things very complicated, because then the data gets archived, and then people in the future who will access the archive to see the data as published on a certain day will need to know why this is missing. So then once this is done, so this 16 to 20 minutes process of getting the data into the database, once that is done, the data becomes available on a version of the website that is internal to the members of our team, and they will go through the data to do the QA work that needs to be done. It usually takes around 10 minutes. Of course, we can't possibly QA the entire data. Not least because we publish close to 45, 50 million figures each day. So it's not really feasible to do it all. However, we do QA the headline metrics and the metrics that we know are of particular importance and gain particular traction. And then if we are satisfied with the quality of the data, we go ahead and release at 4 p.m. You would notice that these lines are not accidentally long. These are concurrent processes that go on. So you would notice that sometimes the QA process goes over release. So once we've released the data, we will still continue to do the QA for some more so in more details, if you like. And if we notice an issue, we will try to rectify it as soon as we possibly can. But we are sometimes delayed. Nothing is perfect. Things in here can break, things can be delayed here. So if any of these things happen, it depends what has gone wrong. If something in the ETL has gone wrong, we need to identify the issue, fix it, and run the process again in here. We need to do a hot fix. If, however, the problem is with the pipeline, then we need to identify where the problem in the pipeline is, then fix that problem in the pipeline, and then build the data again and send it to the ETL. So that would be a process that can take anything up to 2 hours just to build the data, not to fix a problem, but just to build the data, and then needs to go through all this again. So this introduces a very unique challenge to this service that not many of us have seen before, or many of us can claim to have experienced, in that from the time that we have everything ready to the time that we have to release the data, we often have about 10-15 minutes. And there isn't any room, there isn't any margin for things to go wrong. And that is an important point, because we are dealing with daily publication of near real-time data. So basically daily and as real-time as we can get it. So there are 2 sections as I outlined there. So the pipeline part of the service is handled by the data team. That's headed by Claire, who is another one of my colleagues and the head of professional statistics at PHE, and she's also I think in the audience today. And the rest of this diagram, so the part that involves ETL and releasing to the live service, involves the tech team, which would be my team. And this thing is my attempt to create a wall here. So there is a Chinese wall in the middle of these 2 processes, not in terms of our teams, but in terms of the actual processes. They are entirely separate from each other. This is by design to a great degree, because it ensures the security of the source data, and it also makes it easier to identify things when they go wrong. So we've decided to make it very difficult. It is basically impossible to access this place from this place. So from the ETL part, you can't ever access the data pipeline. So that is a security and integrity feature that we've introduced, and it amongst other things, it ensures that we don't accidentally end up releasing something that is not supposed to be released. This pipeline contains information that might be disclosive. It might include identifiable data in it, personally identifiable data in it, and so it needs to be subject to great care. So the complexity, a lot of the complexity associated with the service comes from the volume of data that we handle. As I said, we have 26 sources, and these 26 sources produce close to, or maybe even over at this time, 600 million raw figures. These 600 million raw figures are then processed in the pipeline throughout the day to produce approximately 8 million figures that are then passed on to the ETL to do the processing that it does and calculate the derived metrics, and it ends up being close to 45 million figures by the time it is done. And then they all go into the database. So this is the state of our database as of right now, basically, because when I calculated this, we had already released the data for yesterday. So we have about 1.8 billion records in our main database. We have about 900 million records for demographics, about 15 million records for deaths demographics, nearly 32 million for MSA. So all in all, we have about 2.8 billion records in the database. So next time you're trying to download all of our records for cases, case demographics by an age, give this some thought, because that's not you're not downloading this whole thing. You're downloading it for one day, but still, it's quite a lot of data. So yes, it can occasionally fail if the traffic is very high. But yes, it introduces a whole new level of complexity, because we have a very, very high volume of traffic, you have a high volume of data, and everyone wants all of the data at 4 p.m. So that causes a massive surge on the service, which I'll show you later. And that has implications, of course, on the service. So this is the pipeline. This is how our pipeline currently looks as of now. It is essentially a huge chromosome, if you like, of different data and different processes connected to each other to calculate a whole lot of things that, and then, combine them, sometimes filter them, then, create specific outputs that are then pushed to the ETL. For a closer look, just have a look at this section. I'm just gonna show you a closer look at that. So this section is what we call the SGSS data. So that would be cases for England. And sorry about that. That is the reason why we say, sorry, things are delayed. It just takes time for this to build. So all of these records need to be processed. They all need to be checked, and it just takes time. I think the record associated, the archive associated with the pipeline right now is now in excess of 100 gigabytes of data. So the design of this service has entailed certain considerations, but before I get into that, I tend to communicate with people when I'm doing this. So maybe you can write this in the chat, and I can have a look at it now. Does anyone see anything wrong with this graph? I'm going to give you 15 seconds to just tell me if you see anything wrong in this graph. No? Okay, so let me just move one step forward. Do you see anything wrong in this graph? This is the same graph with England excluded.
Can you go back to the other slide quickly, please, Pouria?
This one?
Yep, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So that one's got England, and then can you move to the other one, please?
Of course.
Thank you.
Someone says in the chat, England's obscuring everyone else.
Well, yes, but you can disable it. You can just click on it and disable it. That is not what is wrong with it. Yeah.
The weekend's delay reporting, or someone said Christmas Day.
Okay, no, this is not about the data. This is about the design. Let me go one step further. Do you see anything wrong here? This is, mind you, this is now excluding England, Scotland, and Wales. No? Okay, so one of the things that we need to consider when providing a national service is cultural sensitivities. This is shown in orange for Northern Ireland. This would be offensive to a lot of people, or green might be offensive to a lot of people. We are impartial. We are not trying to make any statements, but we need to be mindful of cultural sensitivities. So that is why we decided against using orange anywhere in the service, as well as green, just in case we accidentally associate it with Northern Ireland. And that is an important thing. This is just an example of one of the considerations that we have to be mindful of. So next example would be expression of things. So you can see this is taken from, this is an extract from 14th of January. Now it's changed because we have both doses, but then we only had one. So it says people vaccinated first dose, right, up to and including 14th of January. So why is this an issue? So we had to consider, we had a discussion of about an hour discussion on just how to word this. And we had to consider quite a number of issues and criteria. So we could have used any of these. These are all titles that were proposed. It doesn't define the dose. It doesn't define, it gives false impression. So if we say, I don't know, people vaccinated, it gives false impression that they are now immune, whereas they're not vaccinated. They have received the first dose of the vaccine. They have been vaccinated, but with the first dose only. People given first dose vaccination, that's just too verbose to be a title. Vaccines first done. I mean, there are different things that you might be able to come up with even nicer things, but the point I'm trying to make is that a simple, thing that people might think, okay, this is very easy to put in there, but it has consequences, because if we end up saying, people vaccinated in there, or just say, something like vaccines delivered, then people might gain a false sense of security that they're immune, and they will go out, interact with others, and that will have consequences down the line. We might end up giving the impression that vaccines have been offered but not given. Words matter, how we express things matter. It's not always only how things look. And then there is accessibility considerations, which is particularly close to my heart personally, because I do have disabilities, and I have heard all my life that, yeah, this can't be done because of that. And it can always be done. It's just that people are not willing to do it. What's very important is that one size does not fit all. And that is the problem with frameworks and guidelines. We can't turn accessibility into a box ticking exercise. It's very important that we tailor to the needs of the project and the users that we are trying to serve. So the structural hierarchy of the content is very important. How we define content for screen readers, how we define things for people who have other disabilities. It's very important to remember that that accessibility is not only about visual impairment, but people with other types of disability who may need to, who may want to use this service. We don't want to have flashing images in there because that might trigger seizures in people who have epilepsy. We don't want to, have running lines. We don't want to have wide lines of text. We don't want to have, justified text. These are difficult for people to read. So there are different considerations that need to be taken into account. It might mean that we need to sometimes adjust certain parts of our design to accommodate it, but being inclusive is, in my opinion, at least, more important than having the perfect design. So, but there is a balance. We can reach that balance. We just need to cooperate. Now, transparency. This is also another very important part of this service. I'm just quoting here from the I newspaper this weekend. She did an interview with us. And that statement in there is very true. Someone sitting at home in Newcastle sees the data for the first time. All of this data, yes, parts of it may be going to different people at different times, but all of this data in that format is made available to the Prime Minister at the same time as it is made available to the entire country. And that is a very important thing. It's democratizing the data. It's putting the same degree of importance. It's associating the same degree of importance with everyone who uses this service. Open data has its own advantages and disadvantages, but not all advantages are strictly advantages, and not all disadvantages are strictly disadvantages. So it helps people understand government decisions. It helps, it makes the data accessible to millions of people, justifies decisions, improves trust. And we can't do everything ourselves. There are many things we can't do ourselves. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. Then there are disadvantages to it. There is room for misinterpretation of data. There have been many, many instances that I have personally seen people misinterpreting data, reading something from the data that's just not there. For instance, associating the decline in the number of cases with vaccinations, which is not really possible, not that simply because we have been in a lockdown. You can't associate, there is the chain of causation is not there, it's been broken by the lockdown. Then the pressure to publish as soon as possible every day is quite considerable. We have very limited time to do QA, and there is really no room for delays. But these two are double-edged swords. So rapid identification of mistakes and ever-growing demand for data. But before I get to that, I'm just going to show you one or two examples of what people do with our data, because we can't show everything. We can't do every type of visualization or every type of analysis. So that's where people from different parts of the world can be doing that. So these are examples of how people have used our data to produce very, very useful visualizations. So this is an example of it. So this is comparing daily release of new cases by specimen date metric that we publish to the day before, so to previous publication, and showing the change underneath. So this is an animated graph, or they create very, very interesting maps like this for the MSOAs that that are animated on a daily basis, which is a lot nicer than looking at weekly ones, which is already very difficult to visualize on the service because of the volume of data that it requires. These are just two examples of excellent work that has been done using the data that we publish on a daily basis. Let's get into next part. So rapid identification of mistakes. So our mistakes are broadcast on national television within 2 minutes of us making them. So that's basically the gravity of the situation. If we make a mistake in reporting a headline metric for any reason, that mistake is read back to us in the BBC or in Sky News or anything else in 2 minutes at most. I mean, I'm listening to it every day to make sure that the data that we've released has actually been released in different places and people can actually see it. That's one of my personal QA points. And that doesn't really leave us much room for mistakes. So there are really two types of users. Vast majority, and by vast majority, I mean 99.999% of the users tell us about a possible problem, and then they do that to just help us fix the problem. And a very small minority try to catch us making a mistake, either ridiculous or justify an unfounded theory that they might have, saying that no, this whole thing is a conspiracy, for example. But the point in here is not what kind of user someone is. It's that they are all our users. They all are making equally important points, and they both have equal rights to see the data, and they both deserve to be heard. And they just go about doing things in a different way. But there is a different way to look at it. The point, whatever it may be, provides us with a unique opportunity to inform different things. How we do user research, how we adjust our SOPs, how we do our QA to make sure we don't make that mistake again, how we improve our design to make sure that we express things better or demonstrate things better, how we work things, how we add our contents. These are all important things that come from both constructive and not very constructive criticism, but albeit criticism. There is ever-growing demand for data. So we currently have 50 metrics for deaths. So there is something nice about that, in that we are very, very open. I mean, we are doing a whole lot of calculations, produce 50 different metrics for deaths, of which 40 are currently live, and 4 are under development, and 6 have been deprecated. But these 50 metrics for deaths are also a lot of work for us, and they are also open to different types of interpretation and misinterpretation. So there has been instances that I have seen in the media that a certain metric has been added to another metric to produce a new number, but that new number doesn't really represent anything. So death, as announced by the National Statistics Institute, has been added to deaths within 28 days of positive test to say, yes, we have reached a certain number of deaths, but that's not really a sound methodology. But so be it. That's open data. You can always go to the service and look at the data and make up your own conclusion, because that is possible. And that's only possible because the data is out there for you to use and to look at. It prompts trust. Our satisfaction and the trust level has increased since August quite steadily. And it's about 90% now. So it's partly because of the data and our constant work to add even more data and be even more open, but it's also about communication with the users. We try to be approachable, try to be helpful, we try to communicate, we try to put a face to the service, and we try to rectify our mistakes when they are identified as soon as we can possibly do so. And that has helped us build trust in the community. We try to be consistent, we do everything we possibly can to release the data at 4 p.m. if at all possible. We stayed on and did our work on Christmas Day and on New Year's Day. And this has helped build trust in the community. It's also helping people. People are using this data. So it's a lot of responsibility for us because they're using this data to plan their daily activities. In that, someone planning to go to the barbershop looks at the data and evaluates whether it's safe for them based on their unique circumstances to do so. People are planning business activities in that, we are likely to go into a lockdown in 15, 20 days time. So maybe I shouldn't order stocks from my restaurant. These are real stories that I'm telling.
Pouria, sorry to interrupt. Due to that, I'm mindful of time, so if we could conclude in a minute top, so we can read some of the questions already shared by participants. Thank you.
Of course.
Sorry to interrupt.
No worries. I'll try to conclude in about 3-4 minutes. Right. So, of course, we have open source. We have open source all of our code base, so it's all available in 15 public repositories. All can be accessed from this link in here, and this comes with its own advantages and disadvantages. But the important point is that advantages always outweigh the disadvantages. I'm not going to go into much detail here. There is a bit about technology. I don't want to stress too much, but it's here so people can look at it later. In general, we have this surge at 4 p.m. And this is, there isn't any infrastructure in the world that can scale up within 20 seconds to this level. I mean, this is just, what, I don't know, 10 times, 5 times, 5-fold, 10-fold increase in a matter of 30 seconds to 1 minute. So this introduced unique challenges, which would be more discussing, which would be more suitable for more technical audience in general. But you could see it's like clockwork. Every single day you have this at 4 p.m. So this is a very general overview of our servers. So we're using 85 to 180 servers in a microservice infrastructure that do a whole lot of different things in the background. And this is a snapshot of it at around 4 p.m. yesterday. These are the technology stack that we use, the programming languages, and the general service base, and the exact stack of cloud services that we are currently using to provide the service. Again, the details of this would be very, very technical, so I spare you that, and we really don't have much time to get into it. But this is fairly okay. This has changed, but this is the service, the state of service as of the end of November. It's changed some parts of it, not much, some parts of it quite a bit. But you get the idea regarding the complexity of the underlying infrastructure that handles the service and makes it possible to run. Finally, this whole thing would not have been possible. I mean, I'm giving the talk today, but there are some of our colleagues here making sure I don't badmouth their teams. But it wouldn't have been possible with the contribution of many people and many different organizations. And I would particularly like to thank our analysts, who are more often than not overlooked in the whole process, and their work is absolutely vital. Also, all of the public organizations that have helped us, the develop administrations, Palantir and Microsoft, who've supported us throughout this whole project, deserve a big cheer. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pouria, for your presentation. I am clapping here. Thank you to everyone who joined us as well. Stuart, we have some questions in the chat, right? We have about, we have a few minutes for questions. We are meant to finish at 12 sharp. Thank you.
So we've got a couple of questions. I think Jason Dyke had one so we'll do that a couple first and Jason can step in. So Kenneth MacArthur said, have you considered drip releasing data as soon as it becomes available rather than only having a single daily release?
We have, yes, we have considered that. So there are a number of challenges with that. We might adopt a model along those lines, but not for the headline metrics. The reason for that is because the media are very dependent on the service to announce the data, and so are the politicians and the local authorities and so on and so forth. So it is important that we have a set time every day for releasing headline metrics.
That refers back to another question. Like, why did you choose 4 p.m.? You might have mentioned it earlier on.
Entirely by accident, in a sense.
Okay.
So essentially, initially, we had to, wait until so when we were only releasing 4 metrics, we needed to wait until we actually had the daily metrics. And that was coming in part from the tweet that was going out from DHSC, Department of Health. Part of it was coming from elsewhere. But yes, that was at the very beginning of the whole thing. So back in April, when we didn't have any infrastructure in place for it. So that was about 2 p.m. So that's how it started. But now, the reason why we are sticking with 4 p.m. Is because that's we get the final piece of the puzzle, the data that we need at around 2 p.m. from devolved administrations. That's when we have everything in place to kickstart the process that takes about 2 hours to publication.
Cool. So it basically it's based on when you can get the data.
Exactly. Right now it is, yes.
Yeah. So we've got a couple more questions. Have you considered providing data / charts per capita / 100K first, rather than using absolute figures? Comparing data for different areas, e.g. vaccination rates for the 4 nations, isn't meaningful with absolute figures, especially with the dominance of England.
We are working on vaccinations in more details. So there will be other metrics in the coming weeks for vaccinations, providing additional details.
And will you do, because is there plans to be more granular as well, like ethnicity, age, geographic area, that kind of thing?
I can't promise anything, but we are working on it. I can promise that we are working on it, yes. We are trying to source that data, and as soon as we get it, we will publish it, as usually within 1 or 2 days.
Great. And so I'll do a question first from Faustina, and then I'll get Jason to ask his. So Faustina would be interested to hear more about the extent of the involvement of end users in the design process.
And what, sorry?
How are end users involved in the design process?
Right, so we quite frequently run user research sessions with users from different backgrounds and professions, the public, professional users, and we have, I think, run in excess of 100 such sessions so far, probably even more than 100 2030. So they're very frequently consulted. We also run regular surveys to consult people. But we are inviting people to contribute to our decision making quite frequently, as much as we possibly can.
Great. Okay, so now Professor Jason Dykes from the GI Centre here at City has a question. So I think Jason wanted to share his screen with us. So do you mind if
absolutely, yeah. Great.
So Jason, if you're still with us, do you want to chip in? Brilliant.
Yeah, hi, hopefully you can see my screen.
Hi, yes.
Yeah, Sherry.
Yeah.
Hi, so first up, what an incredible effort. I mean, I just think it's fantastic. So I really want to say congratulations. I think you've been really brave and you're obviously working incredibly hard on this. And I just want to shower you with thanks for what you're doing and taking time out to talk to us, okay?
Thank you.
But yeah, as a kind of academic cartographer, I am interested in the extent to which some of what's known in the cartographic community is informing what you're doing. And I'm in Leicestershire right now. I'm in Tugby up here, which is thankfully we have quite low rates. And I think it's 4 total cases, rolling rate 63. And I was looking at the map and thinking, well, hang on, neither numbers 4 nor 63 fit into this 10 to 49 range. So how come I'm green? And I couldn't kind of work this out. And then what I discover is if you actually pan the map around a little bit, it's actually this color here. But you can't really tell that because of a well-known effect, which is the effect of simultaneous contrast, which means that lighter colors, darker colors look lighter if they're surrounded by dark colors.
Yes.
And that's something that can be overcome. You know, there are techniques that can help overcome that. And there are color schemes that can try and help with those kinds of concerns. Absolutely. So I don't know whether you've seen things like Color Brewer, where Cynthia Brewer at Penn State University has a series of schemes that are designed for effective cartography. And I would just, hope that some of what's known in the cartographic and visualization communities can really inform some of the design decisions, because I'm not completely convinced that this scheme is going to be as effective as some others might be. So yeah, maybe it's just a sort of a suggestion there might be room for
I'm very grateful
reuse of what is known to really help people see exactly what's in these maps.
Absolutely. I'm very grateful for your recommendation. There's one one thing I need to highlight, however. There are different considerations that are put into, as I'm sure you can imagine, into the color scheme that you're using. One of the very important ones is the accessibility of it, and that is something we are trying to address as much as we possibly can. So we need to be able to, make the service accessible to people with, color blindness. And we tried to use a uniform, so a unicolor, if you like, or a monochrome even color scheme, but that really didn't go down very well. So I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you entirely. There is one other problem with this whole thing, and it is that the colors tend to be rendered differently on different browsers, and one part of that map is rendered through WebGL, which is your GPU. The other part is not rendered through WebGL, so they tend to render it differently. So the colors never really exactly match, say on Safari. So there are a number of considerations, but I will most certainly take it into account, and I'm very grateful for your recommendation.
Brilliant.
Thanks, that's really helpful. Thank you.
So I think we had a few more questions, but I think, Ernesto, are we to time now?
Yeah, I think so. I guess we may still, if Pouria can give a quick answer to Kenneth's final question, just to, if there's time, you answer the question about vaccination data, but not about prioritizing per capita per 100K data or absolute figures, or why you prioritize absolute figures currently.
But I'm not sure what you mean by absolute figures in the homepage. You mean?
Is that it, Kenneth? If you're still
so I guess there's lots of different examples of on the website of where you show figures, but
but not the rate.
You know, there's more places where you show absolute figures than per
instead of rates. Yeah, okay. Yeah,
and I think per 100K figures are more meaningful to compare one
yes,
to another.
They are, and I agree with you. The reason why they are not always favored is because the data that we are showing needs to be is really seen by a whole variety of different people. And based on our user research, we found that some people seem to have problem with understanding the rate when it's displayed on the graph. So we've come up with a way to have them both in a sense. So any of these decisions are usually made on the basis of the research that we do with users. So that's how we prioritize things, as opposed to just doing it because we feel it's nicer. But I do appreciate your point from a statistical point of view. Absolute numbers, or rather raw figures, are not really useful when it comes to comparing things. So I personally would prefer to look at rates as opposed to raw numbers.
Thank you very much, Pouria Hadjibagheri, Technical and Development Lead of the UK Coronavirus Dashboard for Public Health in England, for having joined us at City University of London at the Centre for HCID. Thank you for all the colleagues at City who joined us today. Thank you for all the members of the public for your questions, comments. If we couldn't ask your question, apologies. Your comments have been seen on the chat. We have a seminar next Thursday, right, Stuart?
Yep, so if anyone's interested in games user experience, we've got Steve Bromley, formerly of Sony Interactive Entertainment, here talking about games user experience. He's like a mentor and really one of the UK experts in that area. So I'm sharing a link to book into that seminar if you're interested. It'll be great to see some more of you there. But yeah, thanks for everyone for coming. It's been great to see such a large turnout, and it was a really interesting topic. And thanks again, Pouria, for giving it today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Pouria. Take care. Take care, everyone.
Have a good afternoon, everyone. Stay safe. Bye.
Oh, yes.